The rain fell over Chicago like a punishment from the sky, heavy and relentless, turning the streets into rivers of grey water that reflected the neon lights of the city. Elena Marchetti ran through the downpour, her heart pounding against her ribs, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. She clutched her daughter's hand so tightly that her knuckles had turned white, but she could not afford to let go. Not now. Not ever again. Sophia was only 5 years old, her small legs struggling to keep up with her mother's frantic pace. The child did not cry. She had learned not to cry months ago when tears meant nothing but trouble. Instead, she pressed her free hand against her chest, where a small stuffed rabbit was hidden beneath her jacket, and she trusted her mother completely. Behind them, the sound of car doors slamming echoed through the empty street. Men were shouting, their voices cutting through the storm like knives. Eleanor did not look back. She knew who was chasing them. She knew what they wanted. And she knew that if they caught her, everything would be over. The warehouse district stretched before them, a maze of abandoned buildings and rusted metal gates. Elena had no plan, no destination, only the primal instinct to run, to hide, to protect her child at any cost. Her shoes splashed through puddles as she turned corner after corner, searching for any place that might offer shelter from the hunters on their trail. And then she saw it. A black car, sleek and expensive, parked in an alley between two crumbling brick buildings. The engine was running, its headlights cutting through the darkness like the eyes of a predator. Elena's first instinct was to run the other way, but her legs gave out beneath her. She stumbled, nearly pulling Sophia down with her, and for one terrible moment she thought it was the end. The car door opened. A man stepped out into the rain, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat that seemed to absorb the shadows around him. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. But what struck Elena most was not his imposing presence or the authority that radiated from every inch of his frame. It was his eyes. They were open, grey like the storm above them, but they did not focus on her. They stared straight ahead, seeing nothing. He was blind. Another man emerged from the driver's seat, younger and alert, his hand instinctively moving toward the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. But the blind man raised his hand, a simple gesture that stopped everything. Silence fell over the alley, broken only by the sound of rain. Elena pressed Sophia against her chest, shielding her daughter with her own body. She could hear the men approaching from behind, their footsteps growing louder with each passing second. She was trapped between two forces she did not understand, and all she could do was hold her child and pray. The blind man tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something no one else could hear. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and calm, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. He said only one word: "Stay." Eleanor did not move. She could not have moved even if she wanted to. There was something in his voice, something that went beyond command, that rooted her to the spot and made her believe, against all reason, that she was safe. The men behind her stopped. She could hear their heavy breathing, their confusion, their fear. They knew who stood before them. They recognized the man with the storm-grey eyes who saw nothing and understood everything. Dominic Caruso, the blind boss of the Caruso family, the man who had built an empire in the shadows of Chicago, who had turned his darkness into power, and who answered to no one. One of the pursuers spoke, his voice shaking with barely concealed terror. He explained that they were only following orders, that the woman had something that belonged to someone important, that they meant no disrespect. Dominic listened without expression. The rain continued to fall, soaking through his coat, dripping from his dark hair, but he seemed utterly indifferent to the cold. When the man finished speaking, Dominic turned his head slightly toward his companion. "Marco," he said, "how many are there?" The younger man answered without hesitation. "4. 2 armed. The others are waiting in the car at the end of the block." Dominic nodded slowly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone, holding it toward the men as if it were a weapon. His thumb moved across the screen with practiced ease, and a moment later, a recording began to play. It was a conversation, voices that Elena did not recognize, discussing payments, territories, and betrayals. The men behind her went pale. Dominic stopped the recording. He spoke calmly, explaining that he knew exactly who had sent them. He knew about the debts, the lies, the arrangements made behind closed doors, and he wanted them to deliver a message to their employer. This woman and her child were now under his protection. Anyone who touched them would answer to him personally. The men did not argue. They did not threaten. They simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the rain as quickly as they had come. Elena stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The man who had saved her was a stranger, a figure from a world she had spent her entire life avoiding. And yet, he had stepped between her and certain disaster, without asking for anything in return. Dominic turned toward her, his unseeing eyes somehow finding her face with unsettling precision. His voice softened just slightly as he asked if she was hurt. Elena shook her head before remembering that he could not see the gesture. She managed to whisper that they were okay. Scared, but okay. "The little one," Dominic said. "She is very quiet." Elena looked down at Sophia, who was staring at the blind man with wide, curious eyes. There was no fear in her. Daughter's face only wonder, as if she sensed something that Elena could not understand. "She is tired," Elena replied. "We have been running for a long time." Dominic was silent for a moment, then he gestured toward his car. "My home is not far from here. You will be safe there tonight. Tomorrow we can discuss what happens next." Every instinct Elena possessed screamed at her to refuse. She did not know this man. She did not trust his world or his power or the empire built on shadows that he commanded. But she was exhausted. Her daughter was shivering in her arms, and the men who wanted her would not stop hunting until they found her. She had no choice. Elena nodded, then remembered again that he could not see. She said yes, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic smiled, just barely, and the expression transformed his stern features into something almost human. "Then we should go," he said. "The rain is getting worse." Marco opened the back door of the car, and Elena climbed in with Sophia still pressed against her chest. The interior was warm and smelled of leather and something else, something that reminded her of old books and wood smoke. She settled into the seat, pulling her daughter close, and watched as Dominic moved around the car with a confidence that seemed impossible for someone who could not see. He knew exactly where each door was, each step to take, each obstacle to avoid. He moved through his darkness as if it were a familiar friend, and Elena realized that his blindness was not a weakness. It was simply another part of who he was. The car began to move, sliding through the flooded streets of Chicago like a shadow through water. Elena watched the city pass by through the rain-streaked window, the neon lights blurring into streams of color, and she wondered what she had gotten herself into. Sophia's small voice broke the silence. "Mommy," she whispered, "is the man going to help us?" Elena looked at Dominic, who sat perfectly still in the front seat. His face turned toward the window, as if he could see the storm outside. She did not know how to answer her daughter's question. She did not know if she could trust this man, or his protection, or the strange fate that had brought them together. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. For the first time in months she was not running. For the first time in months she could breathe. "Yes, baby," she said softly. "I think he is." The car turned onto a long private road, and through the rain, Elena could see the outline of a massive estate rising from the darkness. Iron gates opened automatically as they approached, and the car passed through into a world that seemed to exist outside of time itself. Gardens stretched on either side of the driveway, carefully maintained despite the season, and the house at the end was a masterpiece of old architecture, all stone walls and tall windows that glowed with warm light. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was nothing like anything Elena had ever known. Marco stopped the car at the main entrance, and a moment later the front door opened. A woman appeared, middle-aged and elegant, with silver hair pulled back from a kind face. She carried an umbrella and moved with the efficiency of someone who had spent years managing a household of secrets. Dominic stepped out of the car first, and the woman greeted him with quiet familiarity. They exchanged a few words that Elena could not hear, and then the woman turned toward the car with a gentle smile. "Come inside," she said, her voice warm and welcoming. "You must be freezing." Elena hesitated for only a moment before climbing out of the car with Sophia in her arms. The woman led them into the house, through a grand foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that sparkled like captured stars, and into a sitting room where a fire crackled in an enormous stone fireplace. "Sit," the woman said, gesturing toward a plush sofa near the flames. "I will bring you something warm to drink." Elena sat too overwhelmed to protest. Sophia climbed into her lap and pressed her face against her mother's shoulder, finally allowing herself to relax. The warmth of the fire seeped into their bones, chasing away the cold that had followed them for so long. Dominic entered the room a few minutes later, having shed his wet coat. He moved to a chair across from Elena with that same unsettling grace, settling into it as if he could see exactly where every piece of furniture stood. "You are safe here," he said. "No one will find you within these walls." Elena wanted to ask him why he had saved her, why he had brought her to his home, why he was offering protection to a woman he had never met. But the words stuck in her throat, blocked by exhaustion and fear and a gratitude she did not know how to express. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you." Dominic nodded. Then he turned his head toward Sophia, who was peeking at him from behind her mother's arm. "What is your name, little one?" he asked. Sophia hesitated, then answered in a small voice, "Sophia." Dominic smiled again, that same barely there expression that softened his entire face. "That is a beautiful name," he said. "It means wisdom. Did you know that?" Sophia shook her head, then remembered and said no. "Well," Dominic continued, "now you do, and I think it suits you very well." Sophia considered this for a moment. Then she asked, with the innocent directness of a child, why he did not look at her when he talked. Elena's breath caught in her chest. She started to apologize, to explain that her daughter did not understand, but Dominic raised his hand to stop her. "It is a fair question," he said, "and she deserves an honest answer." He turned his face toward Sophia, his grey eyes calm and untroubled. "I cannot see," he explained. "My eyes do not work the way yours do. But that does not mean I cannot understand the world. I just experience it differently. I hear things that others miss. I feel things that others ignore. And sometimes I understand people better because I am not distracted by what they look like." Sophia thought about this with the seriousness of a philosopher. "So, you listen really good?" she asked. "Very well," Dominic corrected gently. "And yes, I listen very well." Sophia nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation. Then she pulled her stuffed rabbit from beneath her jacket and held it up toward him. "This is Mr. Whiskers," she announced. "He protects me when I am scared." Dominic reached out, and Elena watched in amazement as he found the rabbit with his fingertips, touching its worn fur with unexpected tenderness. "Mr. Whiskers sounds like a very loyal friend," he said. "I am glad you have him." Sophia beamed, and in that moment, something shifted in the room. The fear that had been coiled in Elena's chest began to loosen just slightly, replaced by something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The woman returned with cups of hot chocolate for Elena and Sophia, and a glass of whiskey for Dominic. She introduced herself as Mrs. Benedetti, the housekeeper who had served the Caruso family for over 30 years. Her eyes were kind, and she moved around Elena and Sophia with a maternal warmth that felt genuine. As they drank their chocolate and the fire crackled peacefully, Elena found herself studying Dominic Caruso. He was not what she had expected from a man of his reputation. The stories she had heard painted him as ruthless, cold, a figure of fear, who commanded loyalty through intimidation. But the man sitting across from her was something else entirely. He was powerful, yes, that much was undeniable. But there was also a stillness to him, a patience that suggested he had learned to see the world in ways that others could not imagine. She wondered what had made him this way. She wondered what had taken his sight and what he had built in its place. And she wondered most of all why he had chosen to help her. The answers would come, she knew. In time, they always did. But for now, she was content to sit in the warmth of this strange and beautiful house, to feel her daughter's breathing slow as sleep began to claim her, and to believe just for tonight that they had found a place where the storm could not reach them. Outside, the rain continued to fall over Chicago, washing the streets clean, carrying away the blood and the fear and the shadows of the night. And in the grand house on the hill, a blind man sat in his chair by the fire, listening to the sound of a mother and child finding peace, and smiled. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. If you are not, take a moment to subscribe right now. This story is just beginning, and what happens next will make you believe in second chances, in unexpected heroes, and in a love that defies all expectations. Do not miss what comes next. Morning arrived softly, filtering through the tall windows of the guest room where Elena had spent the night. She lay still for a long moment, listening to the unfamiliar silence, trying to remember where she was. Then the memories came flooding back, the rain, the chase, the blind man who had appeared from nowhere and changed everything. Sophia was still asleep beside her, curled up with Mr. Whiskers pressed against her cheek. Elena brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead and felt her heart clench with a complicated mixture of love and fear. They were safe for now, but she knew better than to believe that safety could last forever. She rose quietly and moved to the window, pulling back the heavy curtains to reveal the world outside. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky washed clean and pale, the color of forgiveness. The gardens below were glistening with raindrops, and in the distance she could see the gates of the estate, standing like sentinels against whatever lay beyond. A knock at the door made her jump. Mrs. Benedetti entered with a gentle smile and a tray of breakfast, fresh bread, fruit, eggs, and coffee. She set it on the small table near the window, and explained that Mr. Caruso had requested that Elena and Sophia join him for lunch, if they felt up to it. There was no pressure, she added. They could rest as long as they needed. Elena thanked her, and when the housekeeper left, she sat down to eat. The food was simple but delicious, and she realized she had not had a proper meal in days. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, and when Sophia woke up and joined her, the child devoured her portion with the enthusiasm of someone who had almost forgotten what safety tasted like. After breakfast, Elena bathed Sophia and dressed her in clean clothes that Mrs. Benedetti had provided. The garments were slightly too large, clearly borrowed from someone else's wardrobe, but they were warm and soft and smelled of lavender. Sophia twirled in front of the mirror, delighted by her new dress, and Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. How long had it been since she had seen her daughter smile like that? They explored the house together, moving through hallways lined with paintings and past rooms filled with antique furniture and books. The estate was enormous, a labyrinth of beauty and history that seemed to stretch on forever. Elena kept expecting to encounter guards or surveillance, the trappings of the criminal empire she knew Dominic commanded, but the house felt surprisingly peaceful, domestic, almost normal. They found the kitchen eventually, a vast space of copper pots and marble countertops, where a young chef was preparing lunch. He smiled at Sophia and offered her a cookie, which she accepted with solemn gratitude. Elena watched her daughter eat and thought about how quickly children adapted, how they could find joy in the smallest moments, even after enduring the worst of circumstances. Mrs. Benedetti found them there and led them to a sunroom at the back of the house, where Dominic was waiting. He stood by a grand piano, his fingers resting lightly on the keys, his face turned toward the windows that overlooked a small garden. He did not turn when they entered, but Elena saw him tilt his head, acknowledging their presence. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." Elena said they had, and Sophia echoed her agreement with characteristic directness. Dominic gestured for them to sit, and they settled onto a comfortable sofa while he moved to join them in a nearby chair. Eleanor noticed that his movements were even more assured here, in his own home. He knew every inch Of this space, every shadow and every light. There are things we need to discuss, Dominic said. I understand if you have questions. Elena had so many questions she did not know where to begin, but she started with the most important one. Why did you help us? Dominic was silent for a moment, as if considering his answer carefully. I heard you, he said finally, running, afraid, and I heard your daughter, trying so hard to be brave. Those sounds, they reminded me of something, of someone, from a long time ago. He paused, and Elena saw a shadow pass over his features. I was not always blind, he continued. I lost my sight 12 years ago, in an accident that also took someone very important from me, my sister. She was young, like your daughter. She trusted me to protect her, and I failed. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with grief that had never fully healed. When I heard you last night, Dominic said, I knew I could not fail again. I could not walk away and pretend I had not heard. I could not let another child suffer because I chose to do nothing. Elena felt her own pain resonate with his. She knew what it meant to carry guilt, to live with the weight of the things you could not change. She wanted to reach out to him, to offer some comfort, but she did not know how. Instead, she told him about herself, about the man she had married, who had seemed so charming at first, so perfect, until the mask had slipped and she had seen the monster underneath. About the debts he had accumulated, the dangerous people he had involved himself with, the way their family had become collateral in a game she had never agreed to play. About the night she had finally gathered the courage to take Sophia and run, leaving behind everything she had known to pursue the hope of something better. Dominic listened without interruption, his face impassive but his attention absolute. When she finished, he nodded slowly. The men who chased you work for a man named Victor Santoro, he said. He controls much of the criminal activity on the south side. Your husband owed him a great deal of money, and when he could not pay, Santoro decided to collect the debt in other ways. Elena felt sick. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made it terrifyingly real. What does that mean for us? She asked. It means that Santoro considers you his property, Dominic said bluntly. He believes he has a claim to you and your daughter, and he will not stop hunting until he gets what he wants. Elena's hands began to shake. She pulled Sophia closer, as if she could shield her from the world with her own body. But there is something Santoro does not understand, Dominic continued, and that is that you are now under my protection. My family has history with his organization. We have resources he cannot match and connections he cannot break. As long as you are here, within these walls, you are safe. Elena looked at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. But his expression was calm, certain, absolutely sincere. Why would you do this for us? She asked again. We are strangers. We are nothing to you. Dominic smiled, that slight curving of his lips that she was beginning to recognize. Perhaps, he said, but sometimes strangers become family. And perhaps protecting you is my way of honoring the sister I could not save. Perhaps it is my redemption. Sophia, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. Mr. Dominic, she said, do you play piano? Dominic turned his face toward her, his smile widening. I do, he said. Would you like to hear something? Sophia nodded eagerly, then remembered and said, yes, please. Dominic rose and moved to the grand piano, settling onto the bench with the ease of long practice. His fingers found the keys without hesitation, and a moment later music filled the room. It was a melody Elena did not recognize, something soft and beautiful and achingly sad, like moonlight on water, like memories of things lost and found again. She watched his hands move across the keys, watched the concentration on his face, and realized that this was how he saw the world, through sound, through touch, through the vibrations that traveled through the air and the wood and the strings. He played with his whole body, swaying slightly with the rhythm, and the music seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him, somewhere beyond words or sight. Sophia sat transfixed, her eyes wide with wonder. When the piece ended, she clapped, enthusiastically, And Dominic laughed, a genuine sound of pleasure that transformed his entire face. "Thank you," he said. "It is nice to have an appreciative audience." "Can you teach me?" Sophia asked impulsively. "I want to play like that." Dominic considered this request seriously, as if it were a matter of great importance. "I would be honored," he said. "We can start tomorrow, if your mother agrees." Sophia turned to Elena with pleading eyes, and Elena found herself nodding before she could think of a reason to refuse. The joy on her daughter's face was worth any risk, any complication, any uncertainty about what the future might hold. "Thank you," Elena said to Dominic, "for the music, for everything." He acknowledged her gratitude with a slight nod, but his expression had grown thoughtful. "There is one more thing," he said. "While you are here, I want you to have a purpose, something to do. I understand that you were trained as a nurse before you married." Elena stiffened. She had not expected him to know anything about her past. "Yes," she said cautiously. "I worked in emergency care for 3 years, but I had to give it up when Sophia was born." Dominic nodded. "I have people in my organization who sometimes need medical attention." Discreetly. "It would be useful to have someone with your skills available, and it would give you a way to contribute, to feel that you are more than just a guest here." Elena thought about this. The idea of returning to nursing, even in this unconventional context, was both frightening and appealing. She had loved her work, loved the feeling of being able to help people, to make a difference in their worst moments. And Dominic was right. She needed something to do, something to remind her that she was more than a victim, more than a woman running from her past. "I would like that," she said finally. "Thank you." "Then it is settled," Dominic said. "Mrs. Benedetti will show you the medical supplies we have on hand. If you need anything else, make a list, and it will be provided." The rest of the day passed peacefully. Elena explored the medical facilities hidden in the basement of the estate, impressed by the quality of the equipment and supplies. Mrs. Benedetti explained that Dominic had built this facility years ago, after too many of his people had been forced to seek treatment in hospitals, where questions were asked and records were kept. Sophia spent the afternoon in the garden with Marco, who turned out to be surprisingly gentle with children. He showed her the different flowers, taught her the names of the birds that visited the feeders, and pushed her on a swing that hung from an ancient oak tree. Her laughter echoed across the grounds, and Elena watched from a window, feeling something like peace settle into her bones. That night, dinner was served in a formal dining room, but the atmosphere was warm and relaxed. Dominic sat at the head of the table, with Elena and Sophia on either side. Mrs. Benedetti joined them, along with Marco and the young chef, who had prepared a meal of roasted chicken and vegetables that made Sophia declare it the best food she had ever tasted. Conversation flowed easily, and Elena found herself laughing at stories about the household, about mishaps in the kitchen and pranks that Marco had played in his youth. It felt surreal, like she had stepped into an alternate reality where danger did not exist and families gathered together without fear. After dinner, Dominic excused himself to attend to business, and Elena put Sophia to bed. The little girl fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted by the excitement of the day, and Elena sat beside her for a long time, watching her breathe and thinking about everything that had happened. She was still a prisoner in a way, still trapped by circumstances beyond her control, but this prison was kinder than any freedom she had known in years, and the man who held her here was unlike anyone she had ever met. When she finally left Sophia's room, she found Dominic in the hallway, standing by a window that looked out over the darkened gardens. He seemed to be listening to something, his head tilted slightly, his expression distant. "You could not sleep?" he asked without turning. Elena shook her head, then remembered. "No," she said. "Too many thoughts." Dominic nodded. "I understand. The first few nights in a new place are always the hardest, but it gets easier." He turned to face her, and even though she knew he could not see her, she felt the weight of his attention. "You are strong, Elena," he said, "stronger than you know. What you have survived, what you have done to protect your daughter, those are not the actions of a weak woman. You should remember that." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes again. She had not felt strong in so long. She had felt broken, desperate, barely holding herself together for Sophia's sake. To hear someone else acknowledge her struggle, to have her pain recognized and validated, was almost more than she could bear. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me." Dominic smiled, and there was something tender in his expression, something that made Elena's heart flutter in a way she had not expected. "That is perhaps the one thing I can truly do," he said. "See people for who they really are, without being distracted by appearances. It is a gift that came from my darkness." He reached out, and his hand found hers with surprising accuracy. His touch was warm, gentle, nothing like the violence she associated with his world. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow will be a better day." Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She watched him walk away, his footsteps silent on the marble floor, and she felt something shift inside her, something that had been frozen for years beginning to thaw. She returned to her room and climbed into bed beside Sophia, but before she closed her eyes, she whispered a prayer into the darkness, a prayer of gratitude for the blind man who had saved them, and a prayer of hope that, somehow, impossibly, they might have found a place to belong. 3 weeks passed in the Caruso estate, and Elena felt herself settling into a rhythm she had never expected. Mornings began with breakfast in the sunroom, where Dominic would often join them, listening to Sophia chatter about her dreams and her lessons, and the adventures she was planning with Marco. Afternoons were spent in the medical facility, where Elena treated the occasional injury and organized supplies with the quiet satisfaction of useful work. Sophia's piano lessons became the highlight of each day. Dominic was a patient teacher, guiding her small fingers to the right keys, explaining the relationship between notes with analogies that made the little girl giggle. Elena would sit nearby, ostensibly reading but really watching the two of them together. The way Dominic bent towards Sophia, the way he praised her progress, the way he seemed to genuinely enjoy her company. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was everything she had never dared to hope for. But the outside world had not forgotten them. Reports came regularly from Marco and the other members of Dominic's organization, updates on Victor Santoro's movements and intentions. The crime boss was furious about losing his prize, and he was gathering resources, calling in favors, preparing for something that made everyone in the household uneasy. Eleanor tried not to think about it. She focused on her work, on her daughter, on the strange and growing connection she felt with the blind man who had become their protector. But at night, when the house was quiet and Sophia was asleep, the fear would creep back in. The fear that this peace was temporary, the fear that one day the gates would fail and the hunters would return and everything she had built would crumble to dust. One evening, Dominic found her sitting alone in the library, staring at the flames in the fireplace without seeing them. He entered silently, but she had learned to recognize the subtle sounds of his approach, the particular rhythm of his footsteps. "You are worried," he said. It was not a question. Elena did not deny it. She told him about the thoughts that plagued her at night, the weight of uncertainty that pressed down on her chest. She told him about the guilt she felt for bringing danger to his doorstep, for putting him and his household at risk because of her own mistakes. Dominic listened without interruption. When she finished, he moved to sit beside her on the sofa, closer than he had ever been before. "You are not a burden," he said firmly. "You are not a mistake. You are a mother who did what she had to do to protect her child. There is no shame in that. There is only courage." "But what if Santoro attacks?" Elena asked. "What if he finds a way past your defenses? What if someone gets hurt because of me?" Dominic was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand in his. "Let me tell you something about Victor Santoro," he said. "He is powerful, yes, he is dangerous, but he is also arrogant. He believes that strength comes from fear, from intimidation, from breaking people until they submit. He does not understand that true power comes from something else entirely." Elena waited, her hand trembling slightly in his grasp. "True power," Dominic continued, comes from having something worth fighting for, something you would die to protect. Santoro has wealth and soldiers and weapons, but he has no love. He has no loyalty. His people follow him because they are afraid, not because they believe in him, and that makes him weak. He squeezed her hand gently. I have spent 12 years building something different, he said, something based on respect and trust and genuine care for the people who depend on me. My organization is a family, Elena, not a perfect one, but a real one. And when Santoro threatens that family, he will find that we are stronger than he ever imagined. Elena looked at him, at this man who could not see her face but somehow saw everything about her. She felt the warmth of his hand, the steadiness of his presence, and she made a decision. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and questioning, giving him every opportunity to pull away. But he did not pull away. He returned the kiss with equal tenderness, his free hand rising to cup her face with a touch that made her shiver. When they finally separated, Dominic smiled. I was wondering when you would do that, he said. Elena laughed, surprising herself. You knew, she asked. I may be blind, he replied, but I am not deaf. I have heard your heartbeat quicken every time I enter a room. I have felt your eyes on me when you think I am not paying attention. I have known for weeks that something was growing between us. I was simply waiting for you to decide if you wanted to acknowledge it. Elena shook her head, marveling at his perception. Is there anything you do not notice? She asked. Very little, he admitted. But that is what happens when you lose one sense. The others become sharper, more attentive. It is not a gift I would have chosen, but it is one I have learned to use. He grew serious again. Elena, he said, I want you to know that whatever happens between us, it does not change your freedom. You are not obligated to me. You are not indebted. If you choose to leave tomorrow, I will help you go. If you choose to stay, it must be because you want to, not because you feel trapped. Elena considered his words. She thought about everything she had experienced in the past 3 weeks, the safety and the warmth and the growing sense that she had found something real. She thought about Sophia, flourishing in ways she had never imagined possible, and she thought about the man beside her, who had given them everything and asked for nothing in return. I want to stay, she said, not because I feel trapped, because I feel free. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. Dominic's smile widened and he pulled her closer. Then stay, he said, for as long as you want, for as long as we have. They sat together in the firelight, not speaking, simply existing in each other's presence. And Elena felt something she had thought was lost forever. She felt like she was home. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Elena's life. She and Dominic grew closer, their connection deepening with every conversation, every shared meal, every quiet evening by the fire. Sophia adored him, calling him her special friend and demanding piano lessons at every opportunity. The household seemed to embrace them completely, treating them not as guests, but as family. But the shadow of Victor Santoro never quite faded. Reports continued to arrive, each one more concerning than the last. Santoro was consolidating power. Santoro was recruiting new soldiers. Santoro was asking questions, offering rewards, preparing for war. Dominic remained calm through it all, managing his organization with the same quiet competence that characterized everything he did. But Elena could sense the tension beneath his composure, the weight of responsibility that he carried without complaint. One afternoon, while Sophia was napping, Elena found Dominic in his study. He was standing by the window again, listening to the sounds of the garden outside. Tell me what you are thinking, she said. Dominic turned toward her. I am thinking about the future, he said, about what kind of world I want to leave for the people I love, about whether it is possible to build something good from something that started in darkness. Elena moved to stand beside him. You have already built something good, she said. I have seen it. The way your people respect you, the way they trust you, the way they believe in what you are doing. Dominic shook his head. It is not enough, he said. Not yet. There is so much more I want to do. So many things I want to change. He turned to face her fully. Before I lost my sight, I was a different man, harder, colder. I believed that the only way to survive in this world was to be more ruthless than everyone else. But the accident, it changed me. It forced me to slow down, to listen, to understand things I had been too blind to see before. He smiled at his own irony. I realized that power without purpose is worthless, that strength without compassion is just cruelty, that the things that truly matter cannot be taken by force. They can only be given freely. Eleanor felt tears forming in her eyes. "When did you become so wise?" she asked. Dominic laughed softly. "Wisdom is just another word for having made enough mistakes to learn from them," he said. "I have made many mistakes, Elena, more than I can count. But I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to be the man my sister believed I could become." He reached out and found her face, his fingers tracing her features with infinite gentleness. "And then you arrived," he said. "You and Sophia, like a gift I did not deserve, like a second chance I never expected." Elena leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "We are not a gift," she said. "We are just two lost souls who found shelter in a storm." Dominic kissed her forehead. "Perhaps," he said, "but sometimes that is exactly what a gift looks like. If you are feeling what Elena feels right now, if you believe in the power of unexpected love and second chances, I want you to do something for me. Leave a comment with the words, 'I believe in second chances.' Let me know that you are here, that you are part of this journey, that this story matters to you as much as it matters to me. Your comment is not just words on a screen, it is a connection between us, a bond that makes this experience real." The attack came without warning. Elena was in the medical facility organizing supplies. When the first explosion shook the house, she dropped the box she was holding and ran toward the stairs, her heart pounding with terror. All she could think about was Sophia. All she could think about was reaching her daughter before it was too late. The hallways were chaos. Staff members were running, shouting, barricading doors. Marco appeared from nowhere, grabbing Elena's arm and pulling her toward the safe room that Dominic had shown her during her first week at the estate. "Sophia is already there," he said. "She is safe. We need to get you there too." "But what about Dominic?" Elena demanded. "Where is he?" Marco's expression was grim. "He is handling it," he said. "Come on." Elena let herself be, led, but her mind was racing. She could hear gunfire now, distant but getting closer. The sound was terrifying, visceral, dragging her back to the night she had fled from her husband's house. They reached the safe room, a reinforced bunker hidden behind a bookshelf in the library. Sophia was inside, huddled in a corner with Mrs. Benedetti's arms around her. When she saw her mother, she broke free and ran into Elena's embrace. "Mommy," she sobbed. "I was so scared." Elena held her tight, stroking her, hair whispering reassurances that she was not sure she believed. "It is okay, baby," she said. "We are safe. Nothing is going to happen to us." Marco sealed the door behind them and checked his weapon. "Stay here," he said. "Do not open this door for anyone except me or Dominic. Do you understand?" Elena nodded, too frightened to argue. Marco left, and they waited. The next few hours were the longest of Elena's life. She could hear the battle raging above them, muffled by the thick walls of the safe. Room but still audible. Explosions, shouting, the distinctive crack of gunfire. She held Sophia and prayed to any god that would listen, that Dominic would survive, that this would not be the end. Mrs. Benedetti tried to distract Sophia with stories, but even the child could sense that something terrible was happening. She clung to Mr. Whiskers and asked over and over again when they could leave, when they would see Dominic, when everything would be okay. Elena had no answers. She could only hold her daughter and wait. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, there was a knock at the door. "It is me," Marco's voice called. "It is over. You can come out." Elena rose on shaking legs and opened the door. Marco was standing in the hallway, looking exhausted but relieved. Behind him, the house was a disaster. Broken glass littered the floor, bullet holes marked the walls, the smell of smoke hung heavy in the air. "Where is Dominic?" Elena asked. Marco led her to the sitting room, where Dominic was sitting by the fireplace. He was injured, Elena could see that immediately. His arm was bandaged roughly and there was a cut on his forehead that was still seeping red, but he was alive. He was alive. Elena crossed the room in 3 strides and threw her arms around him. "You are hurt," she said. "Let me help you." Dominic smiled tiredly. "It is nothing," he said. "Just scratches." Elena pulled back and examined his wounds with professional eyes. The cut on his forehead was superficial, but the injury on his arm was more serious. She could see that the bandage was already soaked through. "This needs proper treatment," she said. "Now." She led him to the medical facility, which had miraculously survived the attack unscathed. There she cleaned and sutured his wound, working with steady hands even as her heart ached with fear and relief and love. Dominic sat quietly through her ministrations, his face calm despite the pain. "Santoro is dealt with," he said finally. He made the mistake of coming himself. He wanted to see me fall personally. He did not expect the resistance he encountered. Elena tied off the last suture and began bandaging his arm. "Is he—" she began, then stopped. She was not sure she wanted to know. "He is alive," Dominic said, "but he is in custody. There were federal agents waiting outside the gates, agents I have been working with for months. Santoro will spend the rest of his life in prison, answering for crimes that go far beyond anything he did to us." Elena stared at him. "You planned this?" she asked. Dominic nodded. "Not the attack itself," he said, "but I knew it was coming. I knew Santoro would eventually grow impatient enough to make a move, so I prepared. I coordinated with people in law enforcement who wanted him gone as badly as I did. When he attacked, they were ready." Elena shook her head in disbelief. "You could have been killed," she said. "Yes," Dominic agreed, "but some things are worth the risk." He reached out and found her hand. "Protecting you and Sophia," he said. "That was worth any risk." Elena felt tears streaming down her face now, tears of relief and gratitude and overwhelming love. "You are impossible," she whispered. Dominic smiled. "So I have been told," he said. The aftermath of the attack took weeks to sort through. The house needed repairs, the organization needed restructuring, and everyone needed time to heal from the trauma of what had happened. But through it all, Elena and Dominic grew even closer. They had faced the fire together and emerged stronger on the other side. Sophia remarkably bounced back quickly. Children were resilient that way, Elena reflected. Her daughter resumed her piano lessons with renewed enthusiasm, insisting that Dominic teach her a special song that she could perform for everyone. One evening, about a month after the attack, the household gathered in the sitting room for Sophia's debut performance. The little girl sat at the grand piano, her feet dangling above the pedals, her face set, with serious concentration. Dominic sat beside her, ready to help if she needed it. "Whenever you are ready," he said gently. Sophia took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The melody was simple, a piece that Dominic had composed especially for her. It was bright and hopeful, full of the same joy that Sophia brought to everyone around her. Elena watched her daughter's small fingers move across the keys, and she felt her heart overflow with love. When the song ended, everyone applauded. Sophia beamed with pride, and Dominic hugged her gently. "Well done," he said. "I'm so proud of you." Sophia hugged him back. "I love you, Mr. Dominic," she said. The room went quiet. Elena held her breath, unsure how Dominic would respond. But Dominic simply smiled, that beautiful, tender smile that Elena had come to love. "I love you too, little one," he said, "very much." Elena felt tears in her eyes again. She seemed to cry so much these days, but they were good tears, healing tears, tears that washed away the pain of the past and made room for the hope of the future. After Sophia was put to bed, Eleanor and Dominic sat together in the library, watching the fire burn low. "She called you Mr. Dominic," Elena said, "but I think she sees you as something more." Dominic nodded slowly. I see her as something more too, he said. I know it has not been long. I know there are complications. But Elena, when I think about the future, I think about you and Sophia. I think about building a life together. I think about being a family. Elena's heart skipped. Are you saying what I think you are saying? She asked. Dominic turned toward her, his grey eyes calm and certain. I am saying that I love you, he said. I am saying that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I am saying that if you will have me, I want to be your husband and Sophia's father. Elena could not speak. The words she wanted to say were trapped in her throat, blocked by the enormity of what she was feeling. Dominic reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a beautiful ring set with a single diamond. I cannot see your face right now, he said, but I can hear your breathing. I can feel your heart racing. I need you to tell me, Elena. Will you marry me? Elena looked at the ring, at the man who held it, at the life that was being offered to her, and she found her voice. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. Dominic's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that left them both breathless. In that moment, surrounded by warmth and love and the promise of tomorrow, Elena knew that everything was going to be okay. She had found her home. She had found her family. She had found her heart. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the garden of the Caruso estate on a perfect spring day. The trees were blooming with white flowers. The air was sweet with the scent of jasmine, and the sun shone down with gentle warmth on the gathered guests. Eleanor wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Benedetti had helped her choose. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, decorated with tiny flowers that Sophia had picked from the garden that morning. She had never felt more beautiful, more whole, more ready for the life that was waiting for her. Dominic stood at the altar, looking impossibly handsome in his dark suit. Marco stood beside him as best man, and Mrs. Benedetti sat in the front row with tears streaming down her face. But the most important guest was Sophia, who served as flower girl and took her duties very seriously indeed. The ceremony was brief but moving. Elena and Dominic exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of love and loyalty and partnership that meant more than any traditional words could convey. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Dominic pulled Elena into his arms and kissed her while everyone cheered. The reception was held in the sitting room, transformed for the occasion with flowers and candles and tables laden with food. There was music and dancing and laughter, and Elena felt surrounded by happiness in a way she had never experienced before. At one point during the evening, Dominic asked for silence. The room fell quiet, and he stood with Elena by his side. I want to thank all of you for being here today, he said, for sharing this moment with us. I know my life has not always been conventional. I know the path that brought us here was not easy, but I also know that I am the luckiest man in the world. He turned toward Elena, his unseeing eyes somehow finding hers with perfect accuracy. Elena, he said, when I lost my sight, I thought I had lost everything. I thought the darkness would consume me, that I would never find meaning or purpose or love again. But you proved me wrong. You and Sophia showed me that the most important things in life cannot be seen. They can only be felt, and I feel more alive with you than I ever have before. Elena squeezed his hand, unable to speak through her tears. Dominic continued. I also want to make an announcement, he said, something I have been planning for a while. As of today, the Caruso organization is officially transitioning to legitimate business only. We will be investing in real estate, in technology, in community development. We will be partners with the law, not adversaries. We will build something that Sophia and any future children can be proud of. Murmurs of surprise and approval rippled through the room. Marco looked stunned but pleased. Mrs. Benedetti was openly weeping now. It will not be easy, Dominic admitted. There will be challenges and complications and people who do not want us to succeed. But with all of you by my side, I know we can do it. We can create something new, something better, something worthy of the love we share." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said. Everyone echoed the "Toast," and Eleanor felt her heart swell with pride. This man, her husband, was choosing to change. He was choosing to leave behind the shadows and step into the light, and she would be there beside him every step of the way. The months that followed were full of transitions. The organization restructured itself, shedding the aspects that had existed in legal grey areas and investing heavily in legitimate ventures. There were difficulties, as Dominic had predicted. Some people resisted the changes, some left for other organizations, but the core group remained, united by loyalty and a shared vision of something better. Elena continued her work in the medical facility, but she also began training other staff members to expand their capabilities. She dreamed of opening a clinic someday, a place where people could receive care without judgment, without questions, without fear. Dominic supported her dream completely, and they began making plans to make it a reality. Sophia thrived. She attended a private school nearby, where she made friends and excelled in her classes. Her piano playing improved dramatically under Dominic's continued instruction, and she began composing her own simple melodies. Watching her daughter grow and flourish was Eleanor's greatest joy. But the most significant change came in the form of an unexpected announcement. Eleanor had been feeling tired lately, more tired than usual. At first, she attributed it to the stress of all the changes, the excitement of her new life. But when the fatigue persisted, accompanied by other symptoms she recognized from years ago, she decided to confirm her suspicions. The pregnancy test was positive. Eleanor stared at it for a long time, trying to process what it meant. A baby. She and Dominic were going to have a baby. She found him in his study, listening to an audiobook about sustainable business practices. When she entered, he paused the recording and turned toward her. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Eleanor shook her head, then remembered. "No," she said. "Nothing is wrong. Something is very right." She crossed the room and took his hand, placing it on her still flat stomach. "I am pregnant," she said. Dominic went completely still. For a moment, Elena worried that she had made a mistake, that he did not want another child, that this news was unwelcome. Then his face broke into the most radiant smile she had ever seen. "We are having a baby?" he asked. "We are having a baby," Eleanor confirmed. Dominic pulled her into his arms and held her tight, his whole body trembling with emotion. "Elena," he whispered, "you have given me everything, everything I ever wanted, everything I thought I would never have." Elena buried her face in his shoulder and let herself cry. Happy tears, grateful tears, tears of a woman who had finally found where she belonged. Sophia was delighted by the news of her impending sibling. She immediately began planning lessons she would give the baby, songs she would teach, games they would play. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and the whole household caught the spirit of anticipation. As Elena's pregnancy progressed, Dominic became even more attentive, if that was possible. He accompanied her to every doctor's appointment, his hand always in hers, his questions thoughtful and thorough. He learned Braille books about fatherhood, discussed parenting philosophies with Elena, and practiced holding baby dolls with a seriousness that made her laugh. The nursery was prepared with meticulous care. Dominic selected every item himself, running his hands over cribs and mobiles and stuffed animals to ensure they met his exacting standards. The walls were painted a soft yellow, and a small piano was placed in the corner, ready for the music lessons that would surely come. One evening, about a month before her due date, Elena found Dominic sitting in the nursery alone. He was in the rocking chair, his hands resting on his knees, his face turned toward the window. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. Dominic was quiet for a moment. "I am thinking about my sister," he said, "about how she would have loved all of this, the wedding, Sophia, the baby. She always wanted me to find happiness." Eleanor reached over and took his hand. "Tell me about her," she said. Dominic smiled softly. "Her name was Isabella," he said. She was 10 years younger than me, born when I was already becoming the man I would be. I adored her from the first moment I saw her. She was everything bright and good that I was not. He paused, collecting himself. The accident that took my sight also took her life, he continued. We were in a car together. There was a crash. I survived. She did not. Eleanor squeezed his hand, but did not speak. For a long time I blamed myself, Dominic said. I was driving. I should have been more careful. I should have protected her. The guilt was overwhelming. He turned toward Elena. But then you came, he said. You and Sophia. And you showed me that. Redemption is possible. That love can heal even the deepest wounds. That my sister's memory can live on through the family I build, through the children I raise, through the life I create. Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. She would be proud of you, she said. I know she would. Dominic nodded slowly. I hope so, he said. I hope so every day. A month later, their son was born. They named him Lucas, after Dominic's grandfather, and he arrived with a lusty cry that filled the delivery room. With joy. Dominic held him for the first time with trembling hands, his face a mixture of wonder and love that Elena would never forget. Hello, little one, he whispered. I am your father, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you are loved. Elena watched them together, her heart so full it ached. This was her family. This was her life. This was everything she had ever dreamed of, and more. Sophia was brought in to meet her brother, and she approached with solemn reverence. He is so small, she whispered. Can I touch him? Eleanor nodded, and Sophia gently stroked Lucas's cheek. I am going to be the best big sister ever, she announced. I am going to teach him piano and show him the garden and tell him stories before bed. Dominic smiled. I know you will, he said. He is very lucky to have you. The family stayed together in the hospital room, cocooned in happiness and love. Outside, the world continued to turn, with all its challenges and complications. But inside this moment, everything was perfect. Elena looked at her husband, her daughter, her son, and she felt a peace that went beyond words. They had all been through so much. They had all survived things that should have broken them, but they had found each other, and that made all the difference. This is what love looks like, she thought, not the fairy tale version, all sparkle and no substance. Real love, messy and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for. And she knew with absolute certainty that they would fight for it forever. 5 years passed like a beautiful dream, each day building on the last until Eleanor could barely remember the woman she had been before. The desperate fugitive running through the rain seemed like a character from another lifetime, someone she had read about in a book rather than lived as herself. The Caruso estate had transformed over the years. The legitimate businesses Dominic had envisioned were thriving now, a network of real estate, developments and technology companies and community initiatives that employed thousands of people and gave back millions to the neighborhoods they served. The organization's past was not forgotten, but it had been transcended. They had built something new, something worthy, something that would endure. Elena's clinic had opened 2 years ago, a state-of-the-art facility that provided healthcare to anyone who needed it, regardless of their ability to pay. She worked there 3 days a week, surrounded by a team she had trained herself, and the satisfaction of helping people heal never grew old. Sophia was 10 now, tall for her age, and brilliant in ways that constantly surprised her parents. Her piano playing had advanced to the point where she was giving recitals, her small fingers dancing across the keys, with a skill that rivaled professionals twice her age. Dominic attended every performance, sitting in the front row with his eyes closed and a smile on his face, listening to the music she made with obvious pride. Lucas was a bundle of energy, always running, always exploring, always asking questions about everything he encountered. He had inherited his father's curiosity and his mother's determination, and he kept the entire household on their toes. His favorite activity was sitting on Dominic's lap while his father played piano, feeling the vibrations through his whole body and laughing with delight. And Dominic himself had grown into the man he was always meant to be. The hardness that had once defined him had softened without disappearing entirely. He was still strong, still capable of commanding respect with a word or a glance, but he led now with compassion rather than fear, with wisdom rather than force, with love rather than power. One evening, the family gathered in the sitting room for their weekly tradition. Elena had started it years ago, a simple ritual where everyone shared something they were grateful for. It had become one of the highlights of their week, a chance to connect and appreciate each other. Sophia went first, as she always did. "I am grateful for my piano teacher," she said, grinning at Dominic, "even when he makes me practice scales." Dominic laughed. "Scales are important," he replied. "They build discipline." Sophia rolled her eyes with affectionate exasperation. Lucas went next. "I am grateful for cookies," he announced solemnly. "Mrs. Benedetti made chocolate chip ones today." Everyone laughed at his honest priority. Eleanor went. "Next, I am grateful for this family," she said simply. "For all of you. For everything we have built together." Finally, it was Dominic's turn. He was quiet for a moment, his face thoughtful. "I am grateful for second chances," he said, "for the opportunity to become someone better, for a wife who saw through my darkness to the light beneath, for children who remind me every day why life is worth living." He reached out, and Elena took his hand. "But most of all," he continued, "I am grateful for love. Real love, the kind that does not ask for perfection or demand surrender, the kind that accepts everything you are and believes in everything you could become. That is what you have given me, Elena, and I will never stop being grateful for it." Elena felt tears pricking at her eyes, as they always did when Dominic spoke from his heart. Even after all these years, he could still move her with his words. The children were sent to bed eventually, protesting sleepily as children do. Mrs. Benedetti, who had grown even more grandmotherly with age, shooed them up the stairs with promises of stories and songs. Eleanor and Dominic sat alone in the sitting room, watching the fire crackle in the hearth. "Do you remember the night we met?" Eleanor asked. Dominic smiled. "I remember everything about that night," he said. "The rain, the fear in your voice, the sound of your heartbeat when you realized you were safe. I knew then, even before I knew your name, that you would change my life." Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder. "I was so scared," she said, "so lost. I never imagined that running from one nightmare would lead me to a dream." Dominic kissed the top of her head. "You saved yourself," he said gently. "I simply provided a safe place for you to do it." Elena shook her head. "No," she said, "we saved each other. That is what love is. Two broken people making each other whole." Dominic was silent for a moment, considering her words. "I wrote something for you," he said finally. "A song. I have been working on it for months." Elena lifted her head, surprised. "A song?" she asked. Dominic nodded. He rose and moved to the piano, settling onto the bench with the familiar ease of long practice. "I wanted to wait for the right moment," he said. "I think this is it." He placed his hands on the keys and began to play. The melody was unlike anything Elena had ever heard. It was beautiful and complex, full of emotion that seemed to spill from every note. She could hear their entire story in the music. The fear of the beginning, the uncertainty of the middle, the joy of the end. It was their love translated into sound, their journey mapped in melody. Dominic played with his eyes closed, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm, completely lost in the music. Eleanor watched him and felt her heart overflow. When the song ended, the last notes fading into silence, Dominic turned toward her. "That is how you make me feel," he said. "Every moment, every day. That is the song you inspire in me." Eleanor crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressing her face against his neck. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "You are beautiful." Dominic turned on the bench and pulled her into his lap. "I love you, Elena Caruso," he said. More than music, more than words, more than I ever thought possible. Elena kissed him deeply. I love you too, she said. Forever. They sat together at the piano for a long time, not speaking, simply being. The fire crackled. The house was quiet. The world outside continued to turn. And Elena knew with absolute certainty that she had found her happily ever after. If you have watched this far, it is because you liked this story. Leave a comment saying I watched this entire story so I can get to know you and see who really enjoys the stories here on the channel. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Each video is created with love for people like you who appreciate meaningful content. If this story touched your heart, give it a like to help it reach more people who need to hear it, and share it with someone who believes in love, in second chances, in the power of human connection. This is not just a story. It is a reminder that no matter how dark things seem, there is always hope. There is always the possibility of something beautiful waiting just around the corner. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing. Until next time, the end.